The purpose of this video is to compare the 40-40-20 semester grade calculation that currently exists and the proposed 80-20 that has been recommended by the District Joint Committee. The 40-40-20 has existed in District 211 for over 40 years. Every experienced teacher has used it and is comfortable with how things currently are. So why change? The idea of a semester grade system like the 80-20 is not new to public education, and it's so common, in fact, that we already have courses within our own district to use semester grade calculations instead of the quarterly 40-40-20. The proposal for our district is whether or not the recommended 80-20 semester grade calculation is appropriate for all classes within District 211. So what are the major talking points? For the 40-40-20, we have had it for over 40 years. It's traditional, and it has a clear division between the first and second quarter. What that means to have that quarter division is that it potentially gives students that feeling of a fresh start, which has motivational advantages. On the downside, however, it creates an awkward cutoff mid-semester where you need to decide where one quarter ends and one begins. This could result in unbalanced quarterly grades when talking about all the different projects, tests, quizzes, and other grades involved within a semester. Add on top of that idea of points, category weights, and how to interact with quarter and semester grade calculations, and the result is a complex grading system that may be difficult to understand and hard to explain to other people. In our traditional system, we inform parents of student grades formally at the end of each quarter, every 9 weeks. But let's talk about the proposed 80-20. It doesn't deal with quarters at all. As a result, there's no midpoint where you have to lock in grades. You don't have to worry about when projects and tests take place and can instead just focus on teaching. This makes it easier to track athletic eligibility, for example, because we'll have in-progress semester grades to report instead of whatever the grade is at a given time within one of the 2 quarters. With the 80-20, category weights will be easier to understand. The grade that students see within Infinite Campus will be their semester grade up to that point in time. It would eliminate the guesswork that usually takes place by everyone when asked the question, how am I doing so far? The grades themselves will be easier to balance. The software will be calculating less and we'll be understanding more of what's going on in there. As far as negatives, there's only one primary concern. There's no longer that fresh start. Mathematically, semester grade averaging is similar to quarterly grades, but the motivational aspect, the fresh start, is no longer there. As the semester continues, the inertia of additional grades will be harder and harder to move as semester grade solidifies, and this can be seen as a negative aspect of the 80-20. In regards to report cards, we'll be increasing our grade checkpoints in the semester from every 9 weeks to every 6. The grades would not be a summative grade for the 80-20, but instead would be an in-progress grade that occurs sooner than the traditional quarter system. The biggest positive for the 80-20 is the simplification of the grading process so that everyone can understand it. The biggest positive of a traditional 40-40-20 appears to be our motivational fresh start. Here's a visual of how the grading complexity varies between the 40-40-20 and the 80-20. In this example, the teacher is using category weights of 60% tests, 30% quizzes, and 10% homework for each quarter. Notice, I said that those are the quarter grades. Those are not semester percentages. So the real percentage of the entire semester for each of these is really 24%, 12%, 4% per quarter for each of these categories. When added together with the 20%, the final exam, we end up having 100% total. For the 80-20, you would tell your students at the beginning of the year that tests are worth 48%. Quizzes are worth 24% and homeworks are worth 8%, with the final exam worth 20% total. The calculations are all in the open without requiring to do hidden calculations. So looking at these 2 illustrations, which would be easier to explain to parents and students? And more importantly, which would be easier for parents and students to understand? Let's look at the mathematics of these systems and how averaging works with the 40-40-20 compared to an 80-20 system. So one of the biggest questions is, how will this change my grades? If I have a 40-40-20 and those grades are instead within an 80-20, how does that affect the score? This is the best part of the video, by the way. It's algebra. Let's start with a basic scenario. If I have 3 tests and I want to average them, all I would do is add them up and divide by 3. So let's say this is quarter 1. In quarter 2, I may have 3 additional tests that get averaged. If I have the same amount of tests in each quarter and I want to average the quarter grades together, I'd add those together and divide by 2. So how do we get from the 40-40-20 scenario, which you see here, and the 80-20? let me do some simplification for you. I can add the fractions with common denominators together. I can then multiply the entire numerator by 1/2 in order to divide by 2. The result is pretty interesting. It's as if we're doing a semester grade calculation all along. We're adding up all the tests and dividing by 6. Now, the reason why your grades may not produce the same results is that most teachers do not have identical quantities and weights on assignments. So an alternative example could be as follows. If there were 4 tests during quarter 1 and 3 tests during quarter 2, the calculations get a bit messier. I can still average them and simplify, but you'll see that when we change this to an 80-20 scale, the result is that some tests are weighted more than others because of which quarters are given. So looking at the second fraction here, that's the results of doing the single fraction. But look at those tests. Those 4 tests are only worth a multiplier of 3 versus those tests which are a multiplier of 4. So if you think about it, the second quarter tests are worth more than the first quarter tests when you finally do the average. So that's a balance issue that we need to consider with the 80-20 versus the 40-40-20. In the current 40-40-20 system, we have this potential imbalance if you do not have the same quantity of tests, whereas the 80-20 just puts it all in one bucket. Hopefully this brief video gives you a better understanding of what it is that we're talking about as regards to the 40-40-20 and the 80-20. We want you to have a confidence in the grading system that works the best for you and your students. Thanks for watching.